The beginnings of psychology and who did it, who did what, Wilhelm Wundt, Edward Tishner. Wilhelm Wundt, follower of psychology, made first psych lab in Leipzig, Germany. Interested in sensations, images, feelings. Method: introspection and reported through self-monitoring and conscious experience. Sigmund Freud, founder of psychoanalytic perspective, believed unconscious contains various thoughts, memories, desires that are unaware but influential. Psych problems caused by sexual or aggressive motives, conflicts. Edward Tishner, a study of what that brought psychology to the U.S. in the 1800s. Structure: use of introspection and structure to determine how experience was formed. Due to limited nature of intro, structure couldn't be used in other studies. William James, made first psych lab in U.S. Functionalism, study of how mind functions to enable humans, other animals to adapt to environment. Expanded field of psychology to include research on emotions. Observed behavior and made first psych testing movement. The various perspectives of psychology, i.e. behaviorism, humanism, et. Cognitive: thoughts, perception, and information processing. Biological: examination of behavior through bioprocesses, brain, nervous system, and genetics. Evolutionary: stresses natural selection, adaptation, evolution of behavior, mental processes. Sociocultural: emphasizes social interactions and cultural aspects to determine behavior and mental processes. The biopsychological model and its importance to the field of psychology. Provides understanding of factors that make up a person's experience on this planet. Explains why there are differences across countries' cultures. Research methods and ethics used in psychology. Descriptive: naturalistic observation. Observation of people, animals, and natural habitat. Survey interview. Questioning of large population. Case study: in-depth study of one research participant or small group. Archival research: studies existing data to find answers to research questions. Correctional: measure degree of relationship between 2 plus variables to see how one predicts the other. Uses correctional coefficients, number between -1 and 1, to indicate strength, direction of relationship. Experimental: controlled scientific procedure that involves manipulation of variables for cause and effect. Considered gold standard of scientific research because single factors can be isolated and effects shown. Ethics on people: informed consent, participants' agreement to take part in study after being told what to expect. Voluntary participation, participants are told that they are free to stop or withdraw at any time. Restricted use of deception and debriefing. Use deception only when necessary and, after data is completed, explain research, any deceptions used, and address concerns. Confidentiality: information acquired during study must be kept private and not published in any identifying way. Ethics on animals: still controversial, mostly rats and mice, used in 7 to 8% of psychological research. Which neurotransmitters are important in psychology and how they work? Acetylcholine: muscle action, learning, memory, REM, sleep, emotion. Decrease plays suspected role in Alzheimer's disease. Dopamine: movement, attention, memory, learning, emotion. Too much is schizophrenia, too little, Parkinson's disease. Endorphins: mood, pain, memory, learning, blood pressure, appetite, sexual activity. Epinephrine: emotional arousal, memory storage, metabolism of glucose. GABA: neutral inhibition of central nervous system. Trank drugs, like Valium, increase GABA's effects, decrease anxiety. Norepinephrine: learning, memory, dreaming, emotion, waking, eating, alertness, wakefulness, stress reaction. Low is depression, high is agitated, maniac states. Serotonin: mood, sleep, appetite, sensory perception, arousal, temper regulation, pain suppression, impulsivity. Low is depression. A concept of neuroplasticity and how it applies to psychology. The brain's ability to reorganize, change the structure, and function through lifespan. The various lobes of the brain and what their functions are. Hindbrain controls automatic behaviors, survival responses. The medulla, which is in the hindbrain, carries info to, from brain, controls automatic body functions. Pons, which is in the hindbrain, respiration, movement, sleeping, waking, dreaming. Cerebellum, which is in the hindbrain, coordinates muscle movement and balance. It's important to memory, sensation, perception, learning, and multitasking. The midbrain orients eye and body movements to visual auditory stimuli. Substantia nigra, which is in the midbrain, secretes dopamine. Reticular formation in the midbrain screens incoming sensory info and alerts higher brain centers to important events, responsible for alertness and consciousness. The forebrain, which is the largest part of the brain. Thalamus, part of the forebrain. Brain switchboard, directing sensory input around the brain. Hypothalamus, which is in the forebrain. Master control for emotions and basic motives, hunger, thirst, aggression. Regulates endocrine system. Hippocampus, which is in the forebrain, forming and retrieving memories. Amygdala, which is in the forebrain, linked to production, regulation of emotions, especially aggression and fear. Cerebral cortex, in the forebrain, responsible for complex behaviors, higher mental processes. It's considered the essence of life. Brain death is when the cerebral cortex no longer functions. Damage can cause behavioral differences and dementia. The three major issues in developmental psychology: nature versus nurture. Nature, governed through automatic genetically predetermined signals. Nurture, governed through specific uprising events. Stages or continuity. Stages, discrete and qualitatively different from one another. Continuity, gradual but steady and quantitative changes. Stability or change, idea that measures personality remains stable or changes through a lifespan. Physical development through the lifespan, especially teratogens and synaptic pruning. Teratogens, environmental agents that cause damage during prenatal development. Synaptic pruning, reduction of unused synapses. Piaget and his theory on cognitive development. Piaget, one founder of developmental psychology, started studying on children first. Realized young children all made the same mistakes older children and adults didn't. Proposed young children's cognitive processes differ from adult. Attachment and parenting styles. Attachment. Secure, seeks closeness with mother when stranger enters, shows moderate distress when separated, happy when returns. Anxious, ambivalent, becomes very upset when mother leaves, shows mixed emotion when returns, inconsistent caregivers. Anxious, avoidant, does not seek closeness or contact with mother, shows little emotion when she leaves and returns, aloof and distant caregivers. Disorganized, disoriented, seems confused or apprehensive in the presence of the mother. Parenting styles. Permissive, neglectful. Parents make few demands, provide little structure, monitoring, show little interest. Effect. Poor social skills, little self-control. Permission indulgent. Parents set few limits, demands, but are highly involved and connected. Effect. Failure to learn respect, impulsive, and out of control. Authoritarian. Parents are rigid and punitive, low on warmth. Effect. Moodiness, aggression, fail to learn good communication. Authoritative. Parents set and enforce firm limits while being highly involved, tender, supportive. Effect. Self-reliance, high-achieving, emotionally well-adjusted. Erickson's psychosocial stages of development. Trust versus mistrust, from birth to 1 year old. World based on basic needs are met. Autonomy versus shame and doubt, ages 1 through 3. If toddler is allowed to be independent, achieve autonomy instead of shame and doubt. Initiative versus guilt, 3 to 6. Preschoolers often learn and initiate activities to develop self-confidence or develop feelings of guilt. Industry versus inferiority, 6 to 12. Successful learning of new, productive life skills, develop sense of competence instead of feelings of inadequacy. Identity versus role confusion, ages 12 to 20. Coherent, stable self-definition develops after exploring many roles and decide who they want to be. Failure results in identity crisis, which leads to role confusion. Intimacy versus isolation, early adulthood. Formation of lasting, meaningful relationship leads to intimacy with others. Non-form causes feeling of isolation. Generative versus stagnation, middle adulthood. Necessary to become nurturer of younger generation, self-indulgence results in stagnation. Ego integrity versus despair, late adulthood. If reflection back on life produces acceptance and satisfaction, ego integrity is achieved. If not, despair experienced. How gender roles and modeling work. Gender role development, learning social expectations for appropriate male-female attitudes and behavior, as well as being expressed publicly. Children aware by age 2. Children learn gender roles in 2 ways according to social learning theorists. 1. Receiving rewards, punishments for specific gender role behaviors. 2. Watching and imitating behavior of others, especially same-sex parents. Cognitive development theorists. Gender role dev is done through activation, observation, interpretation, and judgment of the world around them. Androgyny. Combining both male-female traits to overcome gender role. Freud in the psychoanalytic perspective of personality. Conscious, thoughts, motives a person is currently aware of or remembering. Preconscious, thoughts, motives, memories exist just below the surface of awareness. Can be called to consciousness when necessary. Unconscious, part of the psyche that stores repressed urges, primitive desires. Neo-Freudians and their critics of Freud. Alfred Adler, Carl Jung, Care and Horny. Criticism, inadequate empirical support, overemphasis on sexuality, biology, and unconscious forces, sexism. Categories of personality assessments as well as the assessments included in the categories. ID, or id. Primitive, unconscious component that operates irrationally and acts on pleasure principle. 1. Made up of innate biological instincts, urges. And 2. Pleasure principle, immediate gratification of urges sought by the id. Ego, the rational, decision-making component of personality, operates according to reality principle. 1. Corresponds to the self or conscious identity of ourselves. 2. Reality principle, in charge of channeling and releasing its urges in acceptable ways. Superego, set of ethical rules for behavior developed by internalizing parental and social standards and operates on the morality principle. Morality principle, constant strive for perfection. Selective attention, habituation. Selective attention, filtering out and attending only to important messages. Feature detectors, specialized neurons that respond only to certain sensory info. Habituation, brain's reduced responsiveness due to repeated stimulation of same receptors. Classical conditioning, its developers and what they did, Pavlov, Watson, and how it works. Classical conditioning, a type of learning that develops through involuntary paired associations. Conditioning, process of learning associations between stimuli, responses. Operant conditioning, its developers and what they did, Skinner, Bandura, and how it works. Operant conditioning, learning through voluntary behavior and its subsequent consequences, reinforcing increased behavioral tendencies while punishment decreases them. Reinforcement, adding or taking away of stimuli following a response which increases likelihood of that response being repeated. Punishment, adding or taking away stimulus followed by a response which decreases the likelihood of that response being repeated. Schedules of reinforcement. Reinforcer, strengthens response. 1. Primary, satisfy an intrinsic, unlearned biological response. 2. Secondary, satisfy a learned value. Creates positive or negative reinforcement. Positive, adding of stimulus which strengthens a response and makes it more likely to occur. Negative, taking away stimulus which strengthens the response and makes it more likely to occur. The biology of learning, including mirror neurons and taste aversion. Mirror neurons, believed to be responsible for human empathy and imitation. Taste aversion, classically conditioned dislike for and avoidance of a specific feel whose ingestion is followed by illness.